guidelines under the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. In 2021, the government increased the amount of CDF from 1.6 million kwacha to 25.7 million kwacha per constituency, and expanded the scope of funding from not only community projects to youth, women, community empowerment, and secondary boarding school and skills development and bursaries. Well, today's show is part of the ASK project by the Alliance for Community Action. The project has an overall goal of promoting the voices of citizens in the management of CDF. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of the Ask CDF TV series. Today's topic of discussion, as I earlier alluded, is promoting citizens' voices in the management of CDF. My name is Patrick Soko, and our special guest on the program is Jimmy Maliseni, the program's manager for Alliance for Community Action. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, viewers.
Yeah, we are glad that you could find time to be with us in the studio.
Pleasure is all mine. It's great to be here.
Interesting. To just get our conversation started, there are those of our viewers who may not understand what is the Alliance for Community Action and what you represent and what you stand for.
Well, the Alliance for Community Action, Patrick, is a non-governmental organization that was formed in the year 2013, although real, or should I say, activities began in 2015, which was about 2 years later. And in 2016, I would say that is when the organization really took off. Most of the team members that we have at the moment, including myself, joined the organization around 2016. In terms of what we work in, or the areas that we concentrate on, the Alliance for Community Action solely focuses on working around the question of accountability around public money. So public resource management with a special focus of citizen participation in the way that the government manages money, the way that the government makes choices, as well as in which the ways in which the government spends people's money is our primary focus. And we do that through different initiatives that we have, from things like citizen journalism, fact-checking, projects like this one that has brought me here today, citizen training, and several other initiatives. We do syndicated radio shows across the country where we are sitting in one radio station and we're rebroadcasting in real time the same content across 16, 21 radio stations, or sometimes fewer. In a nutshell, that is who we are as the Alliance for Community Action.
Well, for someone who may be just here in the Constituency Development Fund, CDF, I know it's a common topic in Zambia at the moment. For the sake of our viewers, first of all, let's understand, what does CDF really represent? What is the essence of CDF?
Well, that indeed, Patrick, is an interesting question, and it sounds as if everybody, you'd take it for granted that everybody out there knows what CDF is.
Exactly.
But in our experience, we found that there are some interesting, I would say, gaps, and some of them actually very scary in terms of citizen appreciation or understanding of what the fund is. So to answer your question, Patrick, CDF is a fund that now is a creation or an animal created by the Constitution, like you earlier alluded to, Article 162. You see, in the Bible, and I'm glad we are in a Bible-based institution here.
Exactly.
There was a fight between the devil and Jesus, and the devil was telling Jesus, make bread and do all sorts of things, and his answer was, it is written, it is written. So it is written in the law, in the Constitution, that there will be CDF in Article 162. However, the act that then gives birth to the aspiration of the Constitution is the Constituency Development Fund Act, and the Local Government Act as well. So CDF, to begin with, is the people's money. I think that is one of the key gaps that we find missing. The people in some situations to view CDF as a favor by their MP. Some see it as money belonging to the Member of Parliament, others see it as money belonging to the President, and they see it as different from other public resources.
Exactly.
So basically, CDF, in short, Patrick, is the people's money given to them by the Constitution, and it is one of those items that you'd call a standing item in every budget. What the government can change is the allocation in terms of the amount. But as to whether CDF will be there or not, is in the Constitution. In other words, you cannot discontinue CDF without changing the Constitution. Yes.
Exactly. Interesting response there. Now, we understand that one of the strategies of CDF is to actually increase citizens' involvement in the provision of development and services, and in so doing, empower them to manage their livelihoods. Can you help us understand the role of citizens in the management of and implementation of CDF as well as utilization?
All right. So when you look at the law, Patrick, the genesis or the beginning of CDF in terms of how it should obtain is the citizens themselves. Because sections 36 through to 39 of the Local Government Act provide for the constitution or the creation of the lowest body or statutory body of our governance structure, which is the ward development committees. And through the ward development committees, citizens are supposed to submit their felt needs in terms of projects that they would want to be done in their constituencies. And then the role of the ward development committees is to turn those citizen desires or those citizen felt needs into plans and budgets, which they then forward to the constituency development fund committees, whose role according to the law is to receive from the WDCs those project lists and then create a single project list for their respective constituencies and forward that to the minister. And then it goes through the whole cycle up to the Minister of Finance and then comes back to the constituency as funds given to the local authorities. In Lusaka, for example, that would be the Lusaka City Council, who then come and implement those initiatives that or projects that the community had earlier identified at the beginning of the process. So that is how, in terms of a cycle, that is how the citizen role would appear. But when the money comes back and the council is implementing the projects, or through the contractors, the council is implementing the projects, the citizens now have an oversight role. That is to ensure that they are supporting their local authorities, that what they asked for is what they are getting. In our experience, Patrick, I can tell you that there is a new way of abusing resources in the country, which is delivering a project that the people wanted, but then altering the scope. So, for example, there is the famous 1x3 classroom block in Zambia. So a community will say, what we want is an extension of our existing school infrastructure, and we want a 1x3 classroom block. What usually happens, or what happens sometimes, is that the contractor will come on site and for sure construct a 1x3. But what you discover is that it was supposed to be 15 meters long, but they come and build 12. It was supposed to be 8 meters wide, they come and build 6. And then a different contractor is given the contract to deliver desks. And when they bring the desks, they don't fit in the school. And then you're beginning to wonder, why is it that the desks cannot fit in these classrooms? What has actually happened in the process is that somebody has built a 1x3 classroom block, yes, but it is not the size that was specified in the contract. As a result, where you expected to sit 50 students, you can only sit 30. And suddenly the children are appearing crowded in a classroom. So that happens across many projects. It could be clinics, it could be schools, bridges, roads, even, Patrick. So the citizen role then becomes very critical in being the eyes, as it were, of their own infrastructure and money, by ensuring that what they sent or what they advocated for is exactly the product they are receiving. So it's not just a question of we want apples and you get apples. If you asked for 10 apples, you must receive 10. If you receive 8, then there's a problem.
Interesting. In case you are just joining us, you have not missed much. You are watching the Ask CDF project program that is sponsored by the Alliance for Community Action, and we are discussing issues pertaining to the Constituency Development Fund, CDF. And Mr. Maliseni, if I may ask, why the Ask CDF? We understand that our government has many components to steer development, but why did you actually single out the aspect of CDF?
Well, interestingly, we have been working in CDF since 2016, and there's a reason to that. When you look at our citizen participation in the development agenda of the country, it is ideally supposed to be mainly through two main channels. The first one is what you'd call the central government planning for ease of understanding for our audience, especially with those that may not be aware of all these technical terms.
Exactly.
And in that process, the WDCs are supposed to work with a body known as the District Development Committee in terms of coming up with ward budgets and plans and all of that. But what has been happening over the years, Patrick, is that the plans that are made at the district do not resemble what is made at the province. And eventually, when you have a plan made at national level, there is no relationship between what the people said they wanted at the bottom and what we are eventually paying for in the national budget. So we are paying for jets, we are paying for land cruisers, and yet what is being requested for at the community level is different.
Exactly.
So by and large, there's been this huge disconnect between citizen felt needs and our national plans and budgets. However, historically, CDF has done relatively well. What the people will request through their CDF, or what people will say they want through their CDF allocation, is usually to a larger extent more realized. Secondly, CDF gives citizens direct participation, a more direct way of participation, in that it allows them to create through their WDCs, their budgets, as well as their plans, which thankfully in the current CDF regime, they can even track and see the progress. So I would say that it is the proverbial low-lying mangoes. That is what CDF is. It's one where citizens can have a hands-on. However, the objective for us of getting citizens to get more involved in a process like CDF management is that once they have gotten the grasp and the benefit of being involved in the development agenda for their own needs, then it will give them courage, it will give them confidence, but it will also give them the learning knowledge they need to be involved even at a higher level and in different aspects of development.
Interesting. Now, I understand you are largely a community-based organization. You work, you interact with the community, but how do you encourage citizens to fully participate in CDF within their communities?
Different ways. One of them is what we are doing here today. And like I mentioned, we also do this through radio. So everywhere we are working as the Alliance for Community Action, one of our strategies is to partner with the local radio stations because research has shown through research organizations, I must specify, like Ipsos and Brandcom, whose outputs we've had the privilege of purchasing for our own use, that radio is most of the time the primary source of information in rural Zambia, particularly community radio stations. So one of the ways that we use to get citizens to participate is by partnering with community radio stations or local radio stations. And then secondly, we go into the communities themselves to interact with citizens and train them. So we enter the communities through the churches, through the chiefs, through education institutions, or academia, to use a more general term, and of course through existing CSOs and CBOs that are already doing work in those areas. So yeah, we work in different areas from Kazungula to Nyimba, Mpika, Chipata, Kanchibia. Yes, we've been quite around. Even
in Lusaka, what are some of the major projects you have in Lusaka?
So in Lusaka,
major compounds you target?
Well, the strategy of the Alliance for Community Action is to work in constituencies. And the reason we do that is because of the resource space that we have. If we focused on districts, we realized we would be spreading ourselves too thin, and then perhaps our impact would not be very felt. So in Lusaka, primarily, we've been working in Munali constituency, and we've since extended to Matero constituency a bit. In all the other areas that we are working in, we are still focusing on constituencies. The reason we do that is because a constituency is a contained geopolitical area where citizens are more likely than not going to use the same services. So if you go to Mnali, for example, between Kablonga and between marshlands and Chainda, Mtendere, Kalingalinga, if they don't have power, it will be mostly across the constituency. If a road is bad, it doesn't matter where you live in the constituency, whether you live in the affluent area or the poor area, you are most likely going to be using the same road, most likely going to be using the same hospital. Of course, the Those at the very high end will have access to private health care. But generally, people in a constituency will have more in common than across a district. So the problems of Lilai are very different from those of Matero, for example. The problems of Kanyama and the problems of Lusaka Central are quite different. But if you look at the constituency, people are most likely going to share the same level of public services, and that is the reason why we work in a constituency, because people will be able to understand their problems as common. But then what we do is that what we learn in the constituency, we use it to inform amplification into the districts and into the provinces and eventually the rest of the country.
As a media organization ourselves, as journalists, we have been covering a number of teething issues pertaining to CDF in the implementation, citizens' understanding. But we also want to get your perspective as an organization that works with the community, especially at grassroots level. What do you think are some of the reasons for low citizens' participation in CDF?
Firstly, I would say lack of information. There is, in some instances, what even looks like deliberate holding of information away from citizens in terms of what their role is. Like we just said here, when you look at the Constituency Development Fund Act, when you look at the Local Government Act, even when you look at the CDF guidelines of February 2022, there are role players in there and the citizens have got very well-defined roles. But you will find that citizens hardly know that information. For example, on this project, we are working in Livingstone, we are working in Nyimba constituency, Ruangeni, and Chipata Central. And in all the 4 constituencies, one of the interesting things we found was that they all had to be headhunting young people to apply for the bursaries component of CDF, primarily due to lack of awareness, of information. And you are training and young people are unaware of the availability of this fund. But at the same time, the CDF committee, the WDCs are struggling to find young people to apply. So it's really a troubling situation where you've got these young people that are unaware that there is a fund available for them, and those responsible for the management of the fund cannot find the young people that are supposed to be accessing that particular fund. That's the first problem we find. It is that it is lack of information. Secondly, there is also a lot of red tape around the management processes of the Constituency Development Fund. So when you look at the role of the WDCs, they are understood, or they were created to be a voluntary construct. And so in Livingstone, for example, there were complaints by some members of the WDCs that there are some colleagues of theirs, especially the government technocrats, who are not attending meetings, because for them to come and attend WDC meetings, it is understood that they are on duty, but there is no transport provided for them to go and attend the meetings. So as a result, you've got low participation due to these logistical challenges that citizens are having. And then you've got the real elephant in the room, which is the procurement process, which sits with the local authorities. We had a chat with the Member of Parliament for Nyimba, and he did allude to the fact that there are 2021 CDF projects that have been approved by the CDF committee but are yet to be funded, and money is sitting in one of the banks in Nyimba because procurement has not yet been finalized. So we need to look at citizen participation, we need to look at information dissemination, and thirdly, we need to look at our procurement processes, especially as concerns CDF, because eventually it will be 5 years of the UPND administration, and in 5 years, at the current rate, they might have only spent 2 CDF disbursements if things continue the way they are now.
And Mr. Maliseni, you mentioned quite a number of issues pertaining to the low participation of citizens on CDF. And now that brings me to my next question, which is, but what are some of the effects of lack of citizens' participation in the prudent management and utilization of CDF?
Look, I must emphasize that not all hope is lost, but the real effect is that we are going to be slow towards our aspirations of development as a country. And so if, for example, you have got 2022 CDF disbursed to the local authorities, but yet to be paid to contractors and the work yet to be done. This is August 2022. What essentially that means is that a clinic that was supposed to be used by citizens next year will not be available at the time that it should be. And that delay has got trickle-down effects. It has got consequences. A clinic that is delayed in its construction obviously results in delayed access to health care, which is a fundamental human right that citizens must enjoy. It also means that children will continue where a school was supposed to be constructed, will continue walking long distances. So the longer we take with our procurement, the longer we take with our implementation of projects, the slower we get to citizens realizing their rights, and that is a problem.
Interesting. Our dear viewers, you are watching the People's Verdict, and this episode is sponsored by the Alliance for Community Action, and we are discussing issues pertaining to CDF under the Ask a CDF project. In studio, I have with me Mr. Jimmy Maliseni from the Alliance for Community Action to help me discuss various issues pertaining to CDF. In case you want to join the conversation, you can do so on our social media platforms by leaving a message, and we'll be able to read it through. As well as if you want to ask Mr. Maliseni any question, you can do so by calling the number that is on your screen. And just now going forward, Mr. Maliseni, however, other issues have also emerged pertaining to CDF. Others have suggested to say there has been poor disbursement of the same funds, because people were anticipating that probably before we are looking at the 2023 national budget, the entire 25.7 million kwacha for each constituency should have been disbursed. But others are suggesting to say probably the money for the second, we should be dealing with the money for the third quarter, but we are still dealing with the resources for the second quarter and the first quarter, and other areas haven't even received the CDF, like you area indicated, where it is still domiciled in their accounts. But how can we change this trajectory, and just your perspective regarding those perceptions as well?
Well, I think that there is still hope. But whether we make progress from here depends on how seriously we take the lessons. So I wouldn't say it's all doom and gloom. The good thing is that as things stand, from, I believe, the president himself to the citizen in the constituency, we've all, in a way, become aware of where these bottlenecks sit. So we know where we've been slowed down. Chief among which I just mentioned the procurement process. It means that we have to revisit our procurement processes. We need to revisit our procurement regulations, our procurement laws themselves, and see how we can speed up the procurement process. But also we have seen that there is also slow assessment of applications when they come from citizens, because there are no caps, there are no limits in terms of the number of proposals that the WDCs can receive and subsequently submit to the CDF committee, provided those applications meet the technical requirements. They are then forwarded. And so there is a common chorus from the Constituency Development Fund committees that they are overwhelmed by the number of applications that they are receiving. So it is very evident, Patrick, that we already know where these challenges are sitting. Exactly. What is important for us now as the Alliance for Community Action is for us to look at those blockages. I would use an analogy of a blocked pipe. So this is a pipe that we know that the water is coming in, but it is going in, but it's not coming out the other end. The good thing, though, is that we know where the blockages are. The question is, how willing are we to remove the sediments that are blocking the pipes? That is where really the issue is at the moment. And outside those three, lack of information, low citizen participation, but also low procurement processes and slow disbursement of the funds. If we address these three bottlenecks, I think that we'll see the effects of CDF in much quicker time frames.
Yes, while you are on that, there's the aspect that has been also topical in this country, the issue of revising the guidelines on CDF. Do we really need to revise the CDF guidelines?
We are of the view that we must revise the guidelines. First of all, the guidelines must be aligned to the law. As things stand, and we claim no ultimate authority on this issue, but as far as we can see, there is quite some departure from the aspirations of the law and the CDF guidelines. Some of them not bad, but a subsidiary provision cannot supersede the superior one as far as the law is concerned. So it's a misnomer that the CDF is in a way abrogating the CDF Act. And I'll tell you the critical areas, which are not bad in and of themselves. The first one is the scope of the fund. So right now the fund is covering community projects, 60% of the fund. We have student loans for skills, as well as boarding bursaries, and we also have another component of empowerment.
While you're on that, someone wants to interact with you, Mr. Maliseni.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Hello, you are through to the program. Hello, you are through to the People's Verdict. Hello, good afternoon. Yes, we can hear you. Hello, yes, this is Patrick Soko.
Hello.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello.
Can you hear me? I think the line is pretty bad. You can go ahead, you were explaining.
Okay, so the first thing is the scope. When you look at the Act limits the scope of the fund to community projects. So like I said, the additions are not bad in and of themselves, but they need to be aligned to the law, meaning that we need to amend the Act for it to speak to the aspirations that we have in the CDF fund. The second thing is that when it comes to the empowerment component of the CDF guidelines, there is an account, a revolving fund that is being opened. When you go to the Act, it's very instructive that CDF funds must be managed in a single account. So now we are having at least 2 accounts that are being created for purposes of CDF. And that obviously stems from the creation from the broadening of the scope. So it's very clear that we need to go back to the CDF Act and try and refine it. The third thing that we see lacking in the CDF guidelines and the CDF management as a whole is that some key role players have been left hanging. The WDCs are not remunerated, and there is very low motivation for people to belong to the WDCs. They are almost like the orphans of the process. So obviously it is understood that by their sheer number, they are running into a couple of thousands across the country. But we must find better ways of keeping people involved and motivated to participate in the affairs of the WDCs. The other thing that we find problematic is what is actually in the Act. The MPs still have a lot of power insofar as the management of the CDF is concerned. When you look at the CDF committee will consist of between 12 and 13 people, depending on the number of chiefs in whose jurisdiction the constituency falls. Over 50% or close to 50% of those people are nominated by the Member of Parliament. That gives them an inbuilt advantage in the CDF committee. And remember that the CDF committee's key role insofar as the management of the fund is concerned is to create a single project list. So the MP's priorities will always go to the top of the list because they have a majority in the deliberations.
We'll take that call. Hello, you are through to the program.
Hello.
Yes, good afternoon. What is your name and where you're calling us from? Good afternoon, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You are... Yes, you can go ahead. So the line is fluctuating. You can call us back when you find a good network. I think your line was pretty bad. You can, if you still want to contribute, you can go ahead and do so. But for now, we couldn't proceed with that call because of poor network connectivity. You were explaining, Mr. Maliseni, before I interrupted you.
Yes, so I was saying
on the aspect of the members of parliament.
Yes,
and everything.
I was saying that the members of parliament are still still have a lot of controlling power in terms of what projects eventually end up in their constituencies. So you will have a development that reflects the will of the MP and not necessarily the will of the people. Of course, some MPs will be good and they will allow projects that are not necessarily at their heart, at their heart to proceed. But as things stand, it is possible that the MP will concentrate on those projects that they consider more important to themselves. Remember that the management of CDF is almost a competition between wards. And so when the wards submit their project proposals to the Constituency Development Committee, the Act says that when the committee submits their plan to the Minister of Local Government, the way they list them is to be understood as a priority list. Meaning that if we have a clinic in Mnali or in Kanyama, in Kalikiliki, as number one project, and then we have a secondary school in Chainda listed second, that is the order of priority. In other words, the project that is listed on top is the one that will be funded first. That is what the law says. Now, given this influence that the MP has in the composition of the Constituency Development Fund Committee, it is possible that they can then influence the decisions that the committee makes based on the fact that there is no control in terms of who they appoint. It just mentions where those people must come from. So there is a representative of religious organizations that are in the constituency. There are 2 citizens. There's a councillor from the local authority, a representative of NGOs, plus the MP themselves. And that's already 6 people in a committee that will have 12 or 13 people.
Exactly.
So if something is to be put to a vote, for example, the MP and the people that they appoint or anoint already have an inbuilt majority. So we are of the view that must be revisited. Yes, but also the capacity of the councils must be increased in terms of their capacities to implement the CDF. There are some councils that obviously have got the technical capacities, but some of them are overwhelmed by the sheer number of amount of work they have to do. Take Lusaka, for example. I think Lusaka has 7 or 8 constituencies. All of them must be handled by Lusaka City Council.
Yeah, that's quite.
So you can see the amount of work. So 25.7 million times 7 or 8. That is the amount of work that Lusaka City Council alone must manage.
We take this call. You are through to the program. Hello?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. Your name and where you are calling us from, sir?
I'm calling from Luansha.
Luansha. You are Mr.
My name is Fred Sanga.
Mr. Chisanga, you can go ahead with your contribution.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chisanga.
Thank you so much. I want to contribute because Luansha is nothing behind. Because both things, the CDF, this is the road. I was paying 6.05, the road tax. Up to now, the police were apprehending me for not paying road tax, ETS for my car, and yet the roads are bad. Myself was apprehended. Now, those guys are not taking the money to good use. If they come in CDF, part of it you are saying community development, and we choose the committee to look for the roads to get go right on time. This is the point is, we are saying this to be maintained to Parliament to change the whole thing. Time is running out. I'm following the conversation. We are talking about the way we should the money is paid to people. You know that next year will come. The state allocation hasn't been allocated to the constituency. Can you shed more light on that? Thank you so much. I'm enjoying that.
Thank you. That's Mr. Chisanga, who has been following the conversation. Mr. Maliseni, you can respond to his concerns.
All right. The first one I think that I got is the fact that he has been paying road tax and the roads have not improved. And now there is a component of roads in the Constituency Development Fund scope of resources. I think that the encouragement I would give to Mr. Chisanga is to get interested in the deliberations as well as the constitution of the Ward Development Committee, because that is where it begins. And here today we are discussing the participation of citizens.
Yes.
So what Mr. Chisanga needs to do is to take the bull by its horns, as they say, and find like-minded citizens who also feel strongly about the state of roads in Luansha. And together they can then make proposals to the WDC in which ward they are resident, and insist on that being a priority for the WDCs. And one other piece of advice which we are also giving to communities that we are training is that whereas the law says that each ward is to submit proposals to the CDF committee, the same law also allows wards to do what is called joint projects. So it really boils down to how citizens can work together. One of the things that citizens can do across the wards, most of the roads will not just run across a single ward. So wards can come together and say, if we kuno tulefwa Mpatamato Road to be done, all the wards through whom, I'm just guessing, it's only name I know in Luansha Mpatamato. Exactly. I'm not sure there's a Mpatamato Road, but assuming there's one. So all the wards through which that road passes can come together and make that single proposal and say, as far as these three wards are concerned, our top priority is this particular street. We want this street attended to. If it is water, if it is culverts, if it is a clinic, if it is a school, wards can come together and do joint projects. As a matter of fact, the CDF Act even allows constituencies to do joint projects, meaning that two constituencies or more can come together and combine their 25.7 million kwachas and say, for us, we're putting this money together and we're procuring equipment, for instance, that we're going to use earth-moving equipment to do our own construction of roads and maintenance of roads through the local authorities. I am aware, Patrick, that even before the scope of the fund was increased, must have been Honorable Haivi Hamududu, then Member of Parliament for Wengwa, if I'm not mistaken, and the current Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Jack Mwimbu. There are two constituencies in Monze, I can't remember which year, but did put their resources together when it was still 1.6 million to procure earth-moving equipment or something of that sort for purposes of using on their feeder roads. So these initiatives can still be revived now, but they all begin with citizen participation. That's why we as an organization are very big on citizen participation. The amount of effort, the amount of dedication that citizens will put towards this particular CDF scope at the moment will have a lot of effect in terms of whether this is going to be a success or not.
But Mr. Maliseni, what are some of the benefits of citizens monitoring the implementation and utilization of CDF projects, in case they may think, no, it's not my business, let them do whatever they can, I'm not part of the WDC, I'm not interested because I'm not seeing development in the past. But what are some of the benefits if citizens take an interest?
Well, if citizens take an interest, the first benefit is that they will have their felt needs met. And this term felt needs is really more of a CSO term. But really, they will have the things that concern them the most attended to. So, for instance, Mr. Chisanga's main concern is the road at the moment. I'm sure it's not the only concern he has, but that's a big one for him. So citizen participation means that those things that really matter to them are going to be attended to. Secondly, there's going to be a reduction in terms of corruption insofar as the implementation of CDF funds is concerned, or projects is concerned. Because when contractors know that citizens have got an eye on what I am doing, they are going to make sure that you're not going to get the sand, you're not going to get the blocks. It's not unusual, Patrick, for 3,000 blocks to be brought on site and 1,000 to be taken out in the evening.
Exactly.
But citizen oversight and citizen participation will ensure that public resources are protected. Why that is important is that no president, no political party comes in with their own kasaka kandalama. All this money is citizens. It belongs to the people. So the money that you see being disbursed as CDF is the taxes that you are paying. It is the fees and fines that Mr. Chisanga is paying. I'm sure he uses the toll gate. That 20 kwacha he leaves at the toll gate, the road tax that he pays, the fuel levy that is collected from him every time he tops up on fuel. There is no freebie as far as the tax is concerned. That is the money that is put in one basket that is put together for us to then have these resources available. So citizen participation essentially will reduce waste. It will increase accountability, but ultimately it will bring our felt needs at our doorsteps. The schools we want, the clinics we are looking for, you know, and all the public services that people desire to see in the areas that they are living.
But why are you interested in strengthening the capacity of citizens to demand for accountability in the utilization of our public resources?
First of all, Patrick, it is because every citizen is born with rights. Rights are not bestowed on citizens by anybody, not even the government, not even the Constitution. The role of the government is to recognize, to respect, and to fulfill citizens' rights. And everything that the government does should lead to the realization of citizens' rights. As a matter of fact, when you critically look at all government services and goods, behind those services and goods that the state offers are citizen rights. So, for instance, every child that is born in this country is born inherently with a right to education. However, for that right to education to be realized, the government is required to build a school, train a teacher, equip the teacher with teaching aids and tools, employ the teacher, and deploy the teacher. And then the child will have their access to education or the right to education realized. Everybody is born with the right to health. But the right to health, Patrick, means nothing if you don't have access to health care. So the real job of the government is to ensure that citizens' rights are realized. Citizens must have access to those rights. Otherwise, we shouldn't be voting. The reason we vote is that we can't all be managing resources. So at any given time, we appoint a president and those that work with them to manage public resources for our common good. That is their first and most critical job, to manage public resources on behalf of the people of Zambia.
Interesting. You are watching The People's Verdict, and we are in conversation with Mr. Jimmy Maliseni. He's coming from the Alliance for Community Action. In case you want to ask your question, you can do so. And just to check if we have some people who have sent in text messages so that we can check them out. And if at all there are some questions that need our attention, we can do so. And those are joining us, you have missed much now for now, because we're even going towards the end of our conversation. But let's read some of the text messages that came through. Please advise on the loans for CDF. When are they going to finalize the mode of approval? That's something that we have talked about. Do we have any other one? Dear Camnet and the gentleman, I can see the CDF. I can see the CDF not being yielding the desired results. None projects will be done by December. Guidance on CDF must be revised, and there are too much strings. What will happen if the money ain't utilized? My conclusion is that CDF was rubbished when the people don't know how to administer.
I think that's rushed.
Rushed when the people don't know how to administer it. Zambians like talking. Zambians like talking, but no action. That's RSM Mukushi there. Any other one? Those two questions, you can tackle them, Mr. Maliseni.
Okay, the first one speaks about the modalities or the guidelines for application of bursaries. I think that is already contained in the CDF guidelines. And so I would encourage them, if they don't have the guidelines yet or they don't have the application forms, to get in touch with us on our Facebook page. They can send us a message, or they can also send us a message on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @ZambiaAsks, and our Facebook page is Alliance for Community Action Zambia, and we'll be able to help them understand the process, but also make soft copies of the application forms available. But insofar as the guidelines are concerned, the empowerment funds are called Women and Youth Empowerment Funds, obviously meaning that if you don't meet the statutory definition of youth and you're a man, you obviously can't apply in your own right. However, there are, the fund extends to cooperatives. Obviously, there will be many in cooperatives, so in that manner, men obviously can be beneficiaries. However, what is also interesting, Patrick, is that according to the guidelines, the primary preference in terms of procurement must be given to contractors who are resident within the constituency. So another way that citizens can participate in this fund is by building their own capacity to be able to participate as contractors at whatever level they can. In terms of the deadlines, the Constituency Development Act has a March 31st deadline. I'll need to counter-check that, but there is a definite deadline when applications must be received. However, the minister, as you've seen now, has been given power by the Act to revise the dates from time to time as needs might be. Right now, I want to believe that the dates have been extended, obviously, because it's the first time that the UPND administration is administering the fund. It's also the first time that the scope has been increased and widened. But I'm not sure that next year there will be an extension. So what we're encouraging citizens to do is to right now obtain for themselves dummy copies of application forms in order for them to prepare for next year in case they missed out this year. So when you look at the application forms, they've got requirements that you must fulfill in order for you to be a beneficiary. So for example, to get empowerment funds, you must have a registered business name or entity, either as a cooperative, as a club, or as a limited company with PACRA. You must have a bank account or a mobile money account. You must have a board resolution that says that your organization, your company, or your cooperative has resolved to apply for CDF empowerment and so on and so forth. Those things cannot be done at short notice. So my encouragement to our colleague, unfortunately they didn't put the name, I forget it, is that they can get the application forms now and begin box ticking in terms of the requirements, so that when next year comes, it finds them prepared with the required registrations, required financial obligations, and then they'll be ready to make that application.
But what has been your overall observation on the CDF processes, management and implementation in the districts you are working in?
Well, in the 16 districts that we are working in, I would reduce it to teething problems. Nothing deliberate in terms of sabotaging the process. As an organization, we haven't encountered that. But what we have encountered are challenges in terms of procurement, like I already said, lack of information, but also lack of citizen understanding of the processes, who can apply for empowerment funds, what do they need to attach. So we were hearing testimonies of people having their applications returned to them in order for them to work on them, and then the guidelines give a 10-day window, Patrick, in which you must address whatever is missing in your plan or whatever is not correctly done. And for some of them, you'd find that it is such a thing like a bank account. and some processes are so slow or unavailable locally such that the 10 days would elapse before they are able to open a bank account, and as a result they've missed out. I would say let's take 2022 as a learning year, as a teething year, but we must do much better in 2023.
We cannot end this conversation without us mentioning the aspect of corruption, because this is topical. And in the past, we saw how, for instance, certain groups of people would have a privilege of accessing the money, not even paying back, issues pertaining to corruption. Now, under the UPND administration, how can we ensure that we prevent corruption under the CDF projects?
Well, I think that the first thing, Patrick, that we must do collectively as a country is to believe that corruption can be fought and corruption can be defeated. I think we are coming from a situation where many of us have raised our hands up and essentially thrown in the towel and said corruption is too big, it's too broad, it's too complex, it can't be overcome, it can't be defeated. But from our experience, we found that that is not true. What is true is that when people have a mindset that they themselves, beginning with yourself, I will not participate in bribery, I will not participate in corrupt activities. That is a good starting point. But also the old school principle of be thy brother's keeper. We must be interested in what colleagues are doing within our immediate circles. So if we can control and fight corruption in our immediate environs, it will become easy for us to fight it even at a higher level. And citizen voice and citizen participation has such power that the politicians are afraid of it. As a matter of fact, Patrick, this is one thing that I repeatedly say. I repeatedly say wherever I am, that the biggest fear, the biggest terror that any political institution and individual has is loss of control of public resources, what many people call power. So if citizens can show that this is a felt need, fighting corruption is a felt need for us, we want our money to be protected, we want our money to be used prudently, we want the government to be accountable to the people, it is possible that we can overcome corruption. But critical to the fight against corruption is enforcement of laws, but also, to use street language, examples. Deterrence for corruption cannot go beyond showing an example of what can happen to individuals that involve themselves in corruption. Then the rest of us will see that indeed corruption doesn't pay. And I'm very optimistic that we can overcome this challenge. It's not insurmountable.
We have met some community members, Mr. Maliseni, who are of the view that this government has been hard on the issue of corruption, and others who fear to say, if we fail to pay back the money, this government will jail us. I've opted to actually stay away from the entire process. But how can we create that awareness to say, no, it's about utilizing the funds for the intended purposes? And how can we create enough capacity so that when people get the money, they use it and be able to pay back?
The truth, Patrick, is that not everybody that gets an empowerment loan will pay it back. But that does not mean that you have involved yourself in corruption. Sometimes businesses will genuinely fail, and that will be possible to be seen. What is important is that we do not involve ourselves in corrupt activities. But also, progressively, we can see that there are mechanisms that are coming into place that will help the fight against corruption. I'm very excited, for example, about the Road Transport and Safety Agency Amendment Act, which has created, Patrick, I think progressive, I forget the term, in terms of the fines that we are now going to be paying for exceeding the speed limit. It means that the incentive for paying a bribe has been reduced, because you now have a leeway, or you have an allowance over which you can overspeed, given the depending on the speed zone in which you're driving.
Exactly.
So it is things like that that will help the fight against corruption. It's the same thing with loans. Some of them, I believe, will be insured by financial institutions. There are forces of nature that might come in. If, for example, there is an accident, there's a fire, there will be losses, and I'm not praying for losses, but when those happen and they've got nothing to do with corruption, people should not be afraid that they will be arrested. Business is a risk. So it would be understood that, well, Patrick and his colleagues genuinely went into this contract and it didn't work. But if you got the money and went to Zanzibar for a holiday, then those are matters arising, Patrick. That's a different story altogether.
Exactly. Now, let's also look at the role of civil society organizations in the utilization and implementation, as well as accountability of CDF funds. I
think our role as civil society, we must pay attention to the information gaps that we as a small organization, I must say, in terms of our geographical spread, and other colleagues have also realized. So I think that we have a duty and an obligation to support our fellow citizens by bridging the information gap. So, for example, if you go to our website and our social media pages, as the Alliance for Community Action, we've got all the forms available for download. We've got the guidelines available for download, and we're going out into the communities educating fellow citizens. That's the first thing that we must do as civil society. Secondly, we must also educate fellow citizens in holding the government accountable, and all state authorities to account for the way that they are making choices with public money.
Your concluding remarks?
Well, my concluding remark is to thank Camnet for opening your studio to us, for us to be able to share this information, and also to express gratitude to those that support us for the work that we do. The SCA is dependent on different partners for the work that we implement across the country, so we are very grateful to everyone that supports our work.
Mr. Maliseni, we'd like to thank you for finding time to be with us in the studio, and we hope you also come back when we call you on other programs that we have here at Camnet TV.
Definitely, I look forward to coming back again. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you. Well, dear viewers, this is where we call it a day on this episode of the People's Verdict. Remember, today's show is part of the Ask CDF project by the Alliance for Community Action. The project has the overall objective of promoting the voices of citizens in the management of the constituency fund, CDF. And this is quite an interesting subject that we'll be delving in with the Alliance for Community Action for some few weeks to come, as we talk about the Constituency Development Fund, CDF, which is a critical component in the national budget, and its implementation is what we are equally focusing on. Until next week, when we come with another interesting episode of the People's Verdict, remember, we ask the question and you make the verdict. This has been Patrick Soko. Stay tuned and keep it on Camnet TV.